Welcome to this Inbound Logistics video podcast presented by Inbound Logistics Magazine. Today, we're going to be talking about pallets as supply chain intelligence tools. Our guest is Jonathan Parks, Senior Vice President of Supply Chain for iGPS. And here's our host, Amy Roach.
Thank you, Jeff. And Jonathan, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We got a great discussion queued up. We're going to get really into pallets and kind of go beyond the basics of what everyone knows about pallets. But before we jump in, if you would just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about iGPS and your role there.
Sure. I've been with iGPS for now going on about 6 years. My role is all focused on serving our customers to the greatest ability, giving them what they expect and making a pallet a non-entity for them, making it, I like to treat it like it's electricity. You want it to be operational when you need it. You don't want to have to think about it. And that's what we train all of our staff and teams to do to serve our customers well. As the pallet, as you'll hear over the next 30 minutes or so, is critical to our supply chain. And it's something that most people don't think about. They don't want to think about, but when it does become a problem, it becomes top of mind pretty quickly. Prior to that, pallets has not been, I've been a user of pallets in a variety of careers. I've had time at UPS when I started straight out of school and in their engineering department. Got a good education on transportation operations there and that hub operation specific role. I moved into retail logistics and spent a lot of time optimizing retail operations at the Container Store, and then moved into Rent-A-Center, where we did a large scale supply chain and distribution transformation, allowing that company to use supply chain as a skill and an asset versus a burden. And then we came into this iGPS engagement, and it was something that I wasn't necessarily focused on in this supply chain career of mine, but it came as a great opportunity to take what I coin as a 20-year-old startup and take us from where we were into the future of pallets and serving customers.
Great. So you've really seen the pallet from all angles, which is perfect. So
yeah, when you start to see them in the street, you're noticing them everywhere, and even in many cases, my family, oh, there's some pallets, and I said I've educated everybody, including my family members, on the importance of pallets.
That's really funny. Well, and that's a good segue, because I think, if you take a family member or sort of a layperson, if you will, when you think of a pallet, you just kind of think of, a stack of wood, no big deal. So you just see them in the aisles in the grocery store or, wherever. But obviously, if you're in supply chain, it's a lot more than that. So I guess
Sure.
take me through a little bit, how has that kind of evolved, and what is a pallet beyond, what most people would be able to identify?
Sure, most people would treat it somewhat as a commodity, if you will, and it's just a humble asset that doesn't do much for you until you are without it, and then you start to realize the importance of it. Without pallets in the supply chain, everything would be hand loaded. Everything would be a lot longer in shipment time, and probably more damage, and certainly more onerous just to manage throughout the supply chain. At iGPS, we add technology to our pallets. We add RFID trackers that allow us to keep a good sense of the flow of the pallets in our network, where they have been and where they're going. It allows people like automation companies or companies that are adapting certain facets of automation to integrate that pallet into their supply chain. And so things as simple as a label, a barcode label that's applied on a pallet that goes from one dock to another, can now be replaced by leveraging the RFID technology inside our pallets. So as a pallet comes into the supply chain, whereas before they'd have to go through a series of processes, an automated facility can associate products to it. It's now tied to that pallet until it becomes relieved from that pallet and either for sale or other supply chain events that move it off of our pallet into the shelf space. But what really, I think, sets iGPS apart is beyond just the concept of the pallet, how we construct it and the life that it lives. We build it out of plastic, so it's durable, yet recyclable. And we know that gives us an advantage because the long life allows the pallet to exist, and we don't have to consume as many raw materials over the years for that pallet to continue in the supply chain and ecosystem. The plastic also, it doesn't change shape. It's in that shape for the duration of its life until it needs to be recycled, until it reaches end of life, and then we recycle that and move it into a new asset. The overall concept of a plastic pallet doesn't seem all that intuitive to many people, but when you look at the weight that we offset in the pallet structure, we're saving in some cases 20 pounds or more off a traditional wood pallet, which allows you to put more weight on a truck and get more beneficial shipping economics.
So, okay, tell me a little bit about how pallets have evolved over the past few decades in terms of design, materials, functionality. I know we started with basic wood, and now we have a whole lot more than that.
Sure. Yeah. Wood has been the standard really for decades. And I think it was largely because it was the least expensive material. Although in the last few years, we've seen significant pressures on lumber, especially during the pandemic. But, as I've mentioned throughout this, that there's certain disadvantages of wood. I think, we've talked a lot about the weight factor, but after about, call it 20, 25 trips, the wood pallet typically needs to be discarded. And stringer pallets, what we would call one-way pallets or one-time pallets even, are even less durable. But you'll see things, different materials like steel and plastics used all across the industry. And the steel, of course, is very durable, but it's very heavy and quite expensive. And that's kind of the medium where plastic comes in, and they combine lightweight with incredible durability. But that lightweight goes back to the overall conversation about how it brings sustainability back in. And for every, call it 100,000 pallets of iGPS pallets that are shipped, about 1,000 gallons of fuel are saved. And 20,000 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions are kept out of the atmosphere. And so those are the little things, like when we talk about evolution of material, by adding a different type of material such as plastic, we're able to see not only in the obvious and tangible savings, you see it in the impact on just fuel usage and then greenhouse gases. We believe that the plastic is about 4 times more durable, even despite its lighter weight. And those types of things that add up, whether splinters aren't falling out or nails aren't falling out and damaging forklift tires or truck tires or anything along those lines. We just believe that material evolution has been significant and will continue to benefit the supply chain in ways that most people aren't even considering.
Yeah, absolutely. That sustainability aspect is key. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you touched on that. I was going to ask you kind of how did we get from the wooden pallet to the plastic pallet? What are the differences and what are the benefits? So you touched on some of that, but if you could delineate those again for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, the wooden pallet and the plastic pallet, I mean, and they're the same platform that helps move through the supply chain, right? You're moving the product on an asset that allows it to move multiple quantities in an efficient means. But when you look at the construction of it, the plastic pallet does not have any type of nails, doesn't really go into any type of splinters, or it's impervious to liquid penetration. So there's just not the same burden, if you will, that a company may experience with wood that they would with plastic. Vendor compliance is a big deal. Nobody wants to have product showed up damaged. And so our pallet provides lesser experiences with that, where you're not running into a damaged pallet causing damage to product and then ultimately preventing sales from occurring. The lighter weight of it, you can now operate that pallet where maybe it was a 2-person lift if you're moving a pallet at a time by hand. Now it's a 1-person lift if you needed to do that. You're not worried about it potentially injuring customers on the sales floor if you do have pallets on the sales floor, like many club stores do. And the cleanliness of it, these things are able to be cleaned fairly quickly. You're able to rinse them off, wash them, whatever it may be. And in many cases, they're able to move from use to use without having to be cleaned or even touched from any type of reinspection or repair process.
Got it. Obviously, cost is such a big, sensitive, component for every part of the supply chain. So
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit there about, is the higher cost of plastic, does it level out with all of those benefits that you talked about? Or, how does that come up, I guess, in your, with iGPS and with customers looking to make that decision between wood and plastic?
Sure. I mean, it depends on which side of the cost equation you're looking at. I mean, obviously, we believe that the investment in plastic versus a wood platform makes financial sense for us. We've done this over the last 15 plus years, where we continue to invest in growth in those assets. So we've honed in that process. When customers look at a pricing option between wood or plastic, you have to look at the total cost. And in a lot of cases, we may not be a premium cost, but we do offer a premium service. When you look at the opportunities that we provide people, where just the simple example of reduction in vendor compliance charges, that alone can be material spend for a manufacturer going into a retail environment. They certainly don't want to have their product discounted or charged back as they're shipping it into different retailers just due to something as simple as a pallet puncturing or damaging the goods. The overall economics of it, if you think on the shipping weight, if we're saving 20 pounds per pallet, as long as you're not maximizing the cubic utilization of your truck, and in many cases shippers aren't, because they what we refer to in industry, what they weigh out before they cube out, you're able to put more product on the truck as you save 20 pounds per pallet on average. So you're able to put more on there. And in many cases with our transportation providers, moving our pallets becomes more fuel efficient because we're a much lower load factor on a full truckload of pallets. So there's all kinds of cost advantages that come in, whether it be in the freight side of the business, whether it's in damages or anything of the like. The plastic just offers a couple different alternatives in cost structures that people otherwise experience today.
I want to ask you, and switch into what we talked a little bit about at the beginning, how pallets are now going beyond just that basic functionality, and you can attach technology to that. So tell us a little bit more about how pallets are, becoming part of the data story in the supply chain. How is that happening? Why is that happening?
It's like I ask people all the time, do they want less or more information? And oftentimes people want more information. If you ask someone, if you were to select Uber, let's say you're coming from the airport trying to get somewhere, it's very rare that you see someone select Uber and not follow the dot on the map all the way through until when they get picked up. Supply chain is really no different. However, it seems like in many cases, the technology that we have commercially is almost lesser or inferior to the technology that we have as just basic consumers. Visibility is critically important. You absolutely cannot run a factory and not know that your pallets are going to be there when you've ordered them to be there. So visibility to your shipments, visibility to where your inventory is in the process, and then visibility just to your use of things like pallets in general. What's your spend on pallets and how do you have that visibility to it? So the data that comes along with a pallet, oftentimes we will know things ahead of industry trends or ahead of things that may be going on in the domestic market specifically, just by way of pallet usage. So there have been things that have happened over the years, whether it be issues with farms or issues with agriculture or anything along those lines, that we'll know it before just because we'll either see a spike or a decline in pallet consumption, and therefore it can predict, what the future is bringing for us. But needing to know exactly where your goods are is important. And we've got technology that we've embedded into our pallets that allow us to see where our pallets are at any given point in time. It's not in our entire fleet, but it at least allows us in a portion of the fleet to understand how these pallets are moving through the ecosystem. And as these ASRS or automated storage and retrieval systems come online and become more commonplace, they want to know that the pallet, where it is in their ecosystem, how is the pallet performing, and what's the status of the product. So by tying into things like smart asset, like an RFID tag, or even the cellular tracking capabilities that we've got, it becomes much more than just a shipping platform. It becomes a data resource, and we use a lot of the data just in our own transportation systems to plan and execute what is a pretty complicated pooling operation.
Right. Okay. And then this allows, I would imagine, carriers, shippers, retailers to kind of take that data as they do in other places in the supply chain and help them manage risk and improve performance. Is that a fair, statement?
So if you look at the way that our pallets are operated in a customer's environment, if they're leveraging the RFID tag for their own purposes, they're able to see the age of the pallet, the age of the product, how long it sat before it moved. If they ran into any complications with shipping, they're able to understand the flow and really manage if they're moving their inventory according to their practices that they've established for inventory management. The pallet in and of itself helps them predict more as they move throughout their cycle of production to storage to shipping, and get more predictive in how they would manage that cycle time. It's all about managing inventory accurately. As you've seen over the last couple of years in supply chain, many of the world's best retailers have struggled to figure out supply and demand, and in some cases have been oversupplied or undersupplied. And this just gives you one extra element as you're tracking your inventory down to the pallet level to understand just how effective you are at moving it.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. That track and trace visibility is huge. And then I wonder, does that data integrate for a customer level with a WMS or a TMS, or like, where does that data end up?
It can. It would depend on the level of integration. So if you're in a non-intelligent asset, you're really not going to gain much from the pallet, right? The pallet will move the product for you and serve its purpose there. But if you move to what we call a smart asset like our pallets, you're able to, like I said earlier, displace what would be referred to as a license plate or some sort of tag that identifies product to that. Well, now you've just tied it, instead of going to a tag, you tie it to the pallet and the RFID technology in the pallet. And then that gives you the understanding of the data that was loaded on the pallet, any transfers that have taken place in the system, where that pallet has existed, and then at some point when it exits, you would see that life cycle. So no different than what would be considered a license plate in a WMS. Now the pallet can replace that, and it can be the RFID technology that we call it a GRI, a tracking number. Essentially, you can now tie it to that.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you would, Jonathan, put it all together, what you've mentioned, can you take us through maybe a customer example, a case study that shows how they're using this smart asset and what the advantage is for them?
Sure. It's kind of what I was just mentioning a few minutes ago. The use of the pallet level RFID, that would be the license plate number, if you will. We've got two customers specifically that use that right out of the gate in their manufacturing and then warehousing operations with their automated material handling systems. They're able to eliminate line of sight scanning. So if you think about warehouses they still exist today, but are becoming less and less prevalent, where they have to actually go in and scan the pallet to find out the details and the product that's on the pallet. It's replaced by a simultaneously automatic reading, an RFID reading of the tags on the pallets where they are anywhere in motion. Even in our own operations, we're able to turn up the devices that we use, the gain, which will help us read the RFID tags. We can keep it really, really tight where it points to the RFID tags that are in a few feet of our engagement, or you can turn it up to a larger gain where you could essentially light up or see all the pallets that are in your operation. One of our customers uses an ASRS system, automatic storage and retrieval system, and conveyors that are focused on speed and accuracy of automation. They want to keep the product moving, to keep their lines running, and keep their manufacturing operation at a high OEE. And they just really don't have a lot of time to waste, as they have highly perishable goods. So they want them to keep moving. This linkage between the license plate or logical pallet number and RFID allows the automated system to send information and share it as it goes to the various stage gate, not just to move a pallet, but to know exactly what's on that pallet and where it needs to go. So as a product would be loaded on that pallet, it then integrates with its system and says, this product is on this pallet. And then at some point, the system knows it needs to go to this customer or this storage location or this inspection location. And they're able to do that and integrate with our pallet. So it becomes very critical for them that the smart ID or the smart asset is embedded in their organization and their operation. In both cases, they're seeing higher cycle times and almost 100% inventory accuracy using this technology.
Those are great metrics. Everybody would be looking for that.
Sure.
Are there certain verticals? I think you mentioned that they had, perishables or a short time window. Are there certain verticals where this makes, the most sense because of those types of factors?
Well, we specifically focus on fast-moving consumer goods. So you're going to see it a lot in there in food and beverage, and then just the overall fast-moving consumer goods. So we focus our efforts there because we like the utilization that brings inside a pooled network. But anywhere where you would have just any type of either high throughput operations where you don't have the time to do the manual scanning or the laser scanning that runs into challenges with accuracy, this brings you to a more real-time operation. And they see the benefit. If I go back to the plastic side for a second, they see the benefit of plastic in those operations as well, because there's less breakdowns in those automated systems because our pallet isn't failing, losing material, having nails pop or wood break or splinters in that operation. The pallet is fairly robust and can withstand multiple trips throughout its life.
Got it. Okay, great. And then I have to ask, because, it's just pervasive now in every aspect of the supply chain. Where does AI fit into this with pallets? Is there any overlap there? Is there anything, in this push towards automation that the pallet can help with or can be part of?
Sure. I mean, we use it. I can take an internal case study and then see if that answers some of your questions and go a little bit further. We, for the longest time, when you look at pallet inspection, iGPS was no different than any other pallet operation in the world, where it was a lot of inspection was done manually and relied upon people to come in and follow a specific standard and inspect a pallet and then determine what condition that pallet was in, whether it was ready for use, whether it needed to be cleaned, or if it needed to be repaired, or if it was ready for recycling. We, over the last 2 years, we have taken a concentrated effort to automate that process, to standardize it, and bring a higher level of sophistication to our inspection so that our customers can rely day in and day out that the pallets are of strong, good quality coming to their operations. What we do now, we feed in our pallets as they come in for inspection into a robotic inspection system. It'll take a couple hundred pictures, stitch them together, make a decision in a matter of 10 seconds or so, and then give us an output on an individual pallet basis. And that is not possible without AI. You wouldn't be able to do that at that speed and that volume. And so that's really given us a significant benefit as we think about the quality of our pallets and the overall cost structure of the business as we continue to scale. As you saw in probably the COVID era, people were really struggling with trying to get people into work and feeling safe and feeling like they could have an environment where they were not susceptible to whatever concerns they had at that time. And by us modifying and enhancing the inspection, leveraging technology and AI, we're able to pivot some of the jobs to be now more focused on running a machine than it is now inspecting pallets one by one. As it comes to customers, I'm sure they've gotten more and more AI technologies in their business, and having a consistent platform like the pallet that we have is going to provide them less variability and be more reliant on the systems and tools that they're putting into place.
That's very cool. How long has iGPS been using that AI system that you mentioned?
It started. We piloted it in 2024, and we've been rolling it out across our network over the last year and a half.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Obviously, labor, workforce shortage and turnover in these types of sectors is really tough. So I'm sure that's another benefit for you there as well.
Well, and it's a challenging job to inspect a pallet. And so if you can remove some of those physical burdens by providing tools, you can find roles for people where they can be successful in that. And now you're managing the output of a machine versus the lifting and sortation of a pallet.
Yeah, excellent. All right, great. So I want to shift a little bit and then move into kind of what you see coming down the pike in terms of future outlook. It seems like pallets are really becoming a platform for supply chain collaboration. So, from your vantage point, I guess, what excites you? What's next? What excites you about, whatever pallet innovation is coming up in the future?
Well, I think the pallet in and of itself is fairly defined by the segments that we serve. So the CBA, which sets the standards for the pallets, somewhat confine us, but that's where we use our creativity, experience, and ingenuity to design even the next generation pallet, something that's lighter, stronger, and lives longer. And we're constantly looking at how we make that better for not only for ourselves, but for our customers. I mentioned the automation and what we've done there, but that's the first phase of this process and how that we manage our pallet pools. I mean, there's all the basics around automated vehicles and things like that in a warehouse that pair well with our pallets. So I'm excited to see, as people take on more automation in their operations, whether it's distribution operations, manufacturing operations, they're going to want more of a consistent platform in their supply chain. And so that just continues to offer expansion opportunities for our business, so we can go and serve people in the means that they need. And they, again, don't really want to think about pallets. So we fill in the gap and say that we'll take it, we'll manage it for you, and we'll give you what you need every single day so that your operations can be as efficient as possible. Our own inspection system will just continue to get better. It's as I refer to that, it uses a series of cameras and lasers with an AI-driven scanning capability that inspects it, measures it against our own standards, and allows us to better enhance the quality of pallets coming out of our building. that technology, and as we get more and more data in that, we'll just further expand our knowledge on how we produce a more sustainable pallet. And that's pretty interesting, because in what used to be years of experience and somewhat anecdotal information, now you can go to the data and say, we know we have opportunities to strengthen the pallet in this area or this area, or we know that it's facing, call it the structural defect here. Well, now we know that much sooner than what we would see otherwise. So it just the AI and the usage of the pallets combined now gives you a more comprehensive story of what's actually happening to the pallets and how you can design around that. But we're constantly experimenting with new pallet formulations and how that we build those to use the materials that are at our disposal to make them, like I said, lighter and still maintain the longevity that we're looking for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to tie it back at the end to what we kind of started out with, where, there's obviously, as we talked for the last 20 some minutes, a lot going on with pallets. There's a lot more than meets the eye. So, what advice do you have for companies at this point who maybe are still underestimating the role that pallets can play in their operations? Why should they be looking at this, with a more close eye?
Sure. I guess, I mean, the first thing I'd say is don't underestimate the impact the pallet has on the operation. It's critical to everybody's operation. And sometimes I think it can be seen as a commodity, and they don't necessarily appreciate the impact it can have, positive or negative, in their environment. If they find the wrong type of pallet and for the application that they're looking for, it can create extensive downtime in their operations. It can create additional maintenance dollars in their operations, and not to mention just the service that we offer provides customers with a high degree of confidence. So finding a supplier that can meet all these different elements, sometimes people just get handed the task of finding a pallet supplier, and they go and do it, and they look just at the first initial cost, and they don't think about the entire impact of the pallets that are selected. But let me share, I guess, a quick example how we can provide value, or how a strong partner can provide value. We work with one of the largest wholesale producers, produce vendors in America, and they were getting chargebacks from vendors due to broken pallets, like I was mentioning earlier. And they were facing, for a produce vendor, $13,000 a month in chargebacks, which is pretty expensive for what I'd consider low margin items. After switching to our pallet, they were able to reduce their fees to basically zero. And because it doesn't create a messy environment with nails and splinters, they were able to eliminate costs associated with cleaning processes, and saw a 50% reduction in just their P&L in that type of cost structure. So they're certainly an advocate for us, and when we love to hear those kind of stories. And they talk about in their annual sustainability about, iGPS as a partner of theirs. I think it just goes to show that if not an afterthought, if you think about it in your entire design of your solution, you're going to be significantly better off, whether it's in an automated facility or not. The pallet can become a help, or if treated the wrong way, probably a hindrance. And so our service is, I would say, bar none. We've got really, really happy and satisfied customers with what we provide them. And it's all about maintaining that through A to Z, the pallet design, all the way through the execution and delivery to their locations.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great to hear those tangible results. I know that's what our audience is always looking for. So
Sure.
Appreciate that. Anything else that was, that we didn't touch on that you'd want to mention?
I think when I just consider, I was fairly new to the pallet industry and didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it myself. And so I was guilty of what I just mentioned a few minutes ago, of not thinking of the end-to-end supply chain. There's many people that are still new to the concept of pallet pooling and what benefits that brings to them. They're not exactly sure. And I was at one of the recent trade shows where people are learning about it for the first time. And these are people that are well versed in their career and have plenty of experience. So it's one of those things. Take the time to explore options, take the time to look and understand what the pooling services can benefit from you. And I'd certainly make a plug for that via Plastic. We feel like we've gotten a really good results or track record, if you will, with our customers that show that pooling with Plastic is the way of the future. And as we get more and more equipment and automation in our world, this is just going to become a path of the future, really, for everybody in the supply chain.
Fantastic. All right, great. Well, you gave us a lot of details and a lot of benefits, so I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for sharing everything with us.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate getting the chance to talk about our story. A lot of people don't like to talk about pallets, but now that we've talked the last 30 minutes, I'm pretty certain you're going to look around, you're going to see a black iGPS pallet almost everywhere in the supply chain now as you're shopping and experiencing the various stores that you go into.
There we go. I'll be the one pointing them out to my family.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.